Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. Kris here, and I am so excited to do another Cook with Kris with you guys today. This month we are talking about going beyond the basics. Last month we talked all about becoming a confident cook, and we talked about some of the basics of becoming a better cook. And this month we are focusing all on how to take some of our basic recipes and just take them to the next level, elevate them a little bit, and just make your everyday meals more delicious. So today we are talking about how to make a really easy Caesar dressing, and we're going to turn it into a kale Caesar. I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is, and we're going to talk a little bit about layering salt. We talked about salt a few weeks ago when I was talking about confident cooking and how it's so important that our food is well seasoned and we season it the right way, but that we don't want our food to taste salty. We want it to be seasoned. And so Caesar dressing is one of those things that can be really intimidating to people. I'm going to make it easy for you. No, this is not 100% traditional when it comes to Caesar dressing, but it's gonna taste exactly like Caesar. It's way easier, and it'll help you learn a little bit about how to layer foods that are a little bit salty and make it taste really delicious and not overly so. So what we're gonna do to actually start out though, is we're gonna make some really easy homemade croutons, because Caesar salad needs croutons, right? Am I right? Okay. So what do we need for today's recipe? Actually, let's talk about that really quick. So I've got my kale drying over here, but it's kale Caesar. You could use romaine lettuce as well if you would like. That's more traditional. I am going to use kale. I love the way adding a Caesar dressing, or really any sort of creamy dressing or even avocado, to kale and massaging it in really takes the kale and it breaks down the fibers a little bit, and it makes it a lot more appealing to chew on. And it's just really tasty with Caesar dressing. It lends really well to the lemon juice and the Parmesan if you're using Parmesan, and the salt. So we're gonna use kale today, but you can use, I would recommend either kale or romaine lettuce. You want something pretty hearty. So I'm gonna go ahead and let that continue to dry over here. We're gonna make our homemade croutons. Now, of course, you could definitely buy store-bought croutons if you want, or you can leave the croutons off. I really like them. I like when we talk about flavor and we talk about the foundations of flavor, it's taste, texture, and temperature. So we are covering the taste when it comes to the Caesar dressing we're gonna make in a little bit, but then the texture comes from adding something that's a little bit different. It's a big bowl of kale. We're adding the creamy texture of the Caesar dressing, but adding something a little bit crunchy on top, especially if whatever protein you're gonna add on top is a little bit softer as well. I was planning on using shrimp, but then I used the shrimp earlier in the week, so we're actually going to just do rotisserie chicken on top to add some protein. But the crunchy croutons, which I'll show you in just a second, add a little bit of texture to that. I also love using roasted chickpeas, either with or separate to the croutons. So that's another option too. It's also a gluten-free option if you don't want to use gluten-free bread. So that's another option I really love. So you've got the kale. We're gonna make the homemade croutons, or you can use store-bought in just a minute. You're gonna want some Parmesan cheese, or I'm gonna give you guys I'm gonna give you a fish-free option today. You could use vegan mayo and make it totally vegan as well, and you could use nutritional yeast instead of Parmesan, or a vegan parm as well if you wanna make this totally plant-based. I'm going to use Parmesan. I like the Parmesan in these big chunks, or I like grating it myself with the microplane. This is what I'm using today. This is from Trader Joe's. For those of you wondering, I love a good Parmesan on there. And so the ingredients for Caesar, which we'll get to right after we do the homemade croutons, is I use my recipe for homemade mayo. You can find this on my blog. It's super easy. It's like 3 ingredients. It's avocado oil, sea salt, lemon juice, 4, and an egg. And so I made some of my homemade mayo. I actually recorded this, so I'll share this with you guys probably in Reels in sometime in the next week. You're also gonna need, this is optional, but I really like adding a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. So we're gonna add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. That's so hard to say. I am going to use a couple. I know there are gonna be a bunch of you who are like, ew, gross. Trust me on this, okay? It adds flavor, and we'll talk about why. I'm gonna use some flat fillet anchovies, but if you don't have anchovies or anchovy paste, you could use that too. And you wanna keep it vegan or fish-free, you can use capers, okay? Capers have a little bit of that fishy flavor, and they have the brininess that's necessary to make this really taste like Caesar. So you could totally skip the anchovies entirely and use capers instead. Little bit of sea salt, always a lemon, and always garlic. Now, if you don't do raw garlic, if it doesn't feel good in your body, if you're someone who struggles with IBS and you can't handle garlic, use a garlic flavored oil when you're making the mayonnaise. That will add the garlic flavor and make a really delicious, garlicky mayo without the actual physical garlic. Most people can do well with a garlic infused oil. And I'm just saying most people, this is just a general, as somebody who has struggled with IBS for 2 decades and who knows a lot about FODMAPs and who's worked with clients with IBS, garlic oil tends to do better for most people than the actual garlic. So I just wanted to mention that. Just because, I like to include everyone, especially my fellow IBSers who are like, but I can't do garlic. You can still make Caesar and it'll still be delicious. All right, let's go ahead and let's jump into, before we make our Caesar dressing, let's go ahead and make some homemade croutons. So these are just random end pieces of bread. We like the sprouted grain or the sourdough bread. This is like the sprouted sourdough from Trader Joe's. And when it gets to the end and nobody wants to eat those end pieces, I put them in a stasher bag and I stick them in the freezer. Now, they get kind of stale in the freezer, and they're not all that great when you take them out of the freezer. Could you toast them up? Totally, but that's what we're gonna do when we make homemade croutons. So right here, I have about 4 pieces of just like end pieces of bread, and this is such a great way to use up something you already have. Danny, you need to order more infused oil. Yes, you do. Oh my gosh, let me think of the brand. There's one brand of garlic infused oil that I really, really love, and if I don't remember when I'm on live, I will post it to my stories later. I mean, you can get any sort of garlic infused oil, but it's really good. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to take my bread and I'm just gonna chop it on up, okay? And just a warning for those of you who love your knives, this is not great for your knife. You could use a serrated knife if you want to, but make sure you sharpen your knife after you use it on bread. I'm just chopping it up into bite-sized pieces. Okay, this is a really good tip when it comes to any sort of salad that you are making, okay? Whether we're talking about the croutons, which are obviously gonna shrink a little bit when they go in the oven. By the way, I have my oven at 375 right now, so we're just gonna toast them. Whenever you're making any sort of salad, you wanna make sure, I see this mistake at restaurants all the time, and it drives me crazy. Not many things drive me crazy. I give people a lot of grace at restaurants, but everything that you put in your salad, it needs to be bite-sized. No one wants to eat an entire head of romaine lettuce in their Caesar salad when they go out. So make sure that whatever you're chopping up is going to be bite-sized. So we're just doing bite-sized pieces over here. Just going ahead and chopping this up. And actually, I need another bowl. So hold on one sec. Usually I'm prepared, but life. All right, I've got myself a big bowl here. We're just gonna go ahead and try not to bang around too much. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add this bread to a bowl. You can use whatever bread you want. Like I said, I'm just using the leftover pieces of bread that we had in the freezer, and we're gonna make some really delicious homemade croutons. Now, my preference, you guys, is if I make homemade sourdough bread and I keep those pieces in the freezer, sourdough croutons are the best, but use what you got. Keep the leftover bread, no waste. Use it for croutons for your Caesar. So I'm just chopping these into bite-sized pieces. I'm going to toss them in the bowl with just a drizzle of oil. I don't know why IG's dying on me again over here. I'm gonna add the little pieces too because they get nice and crispy. You're gonna wanna add a drizzle of oil. You do not want this to be like soaked in oil or it's not gonna have the desired effect. You want it to be crispy. So I'm gonna use a little bit of avocado oil. You can use olive, you can use whatever you got. We're just gonna use a little drizzle here. You can always add more. Remember, just like with salt, you can always add more. So let's start with a little bit, taste as you go. I'm gonna do a pinch of salt. We're gonna use our salt technique right from above with our fingers, using the pinching motion. None of this like, scooping on. We're gonna move it all around, right? We're learning the skills that we learned earlier or last month when we talked about being a confident cook. I'm going to use some garlic powder. Again, you can use garlic oil instead, or you can leave this out, but I like a little garlic powder or a lot of garlic powder. We're garlic fans in this family. And I'm going to use a little bit of Italian seasoning. Now you can use basically whatever herb you've got on hand or none at all. You can totally just keep it to salt. You can keep it to garlic powder. Totally up to you. I just like a little extra something. So you could be real professional and you could use a whisk a whisk. You could use a whisk, but don't use a whisk. You could use I don't know where my brain is today, you guys. I'm dropping things. You could use tongs, or you can just toss them. Or like I normally use my hands, but I have to use my hands for a lot of other things today. So here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at them and I'm going, all right, they're still kind of dry. I need a little bit more oil. It's bread. It's going to soak up some of the oil. If you guys want to get extra fancy, you could use melted butter too. Really delicious. I know that homemade croutons are not something, you guys didn't come here for homemade croutons or to watch me throw them at myself. I don't know why that's happening today. But once they're a little bit moist, okay, and they're all coated in the seasonings and with a little bit of salt. Okay, just a tiny bit more. Sorry, I got a phone call. I don't know from who. All right, we're gonna go ahead and toss these in the oven. I am going to toss them on a parchment lined baking sheet. Now you do not need to use parchment, but it is gonna help keep them crispy, and they're not likely to stick to the bottom of your pan, but if it is an older pan, like the one I'm using, we don't want our bread to burn. So, how long are we gonna toast these for, Kris? We're gonna toast them until they're done. Until they're toasty. About 5-ish minutes. This comes together quick, you guys. This is a 20-minute dinner, especially if you are using a pre-cooked protein. If you're using shrimp like I had originally planned, that also takes like 10 minutes to cook. So, super easy dinner. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pop this in. Here we go. 375 for about 5 to 10 minutes. We're gonna toss in about 5 minutes and see how they look. Everyone's oven's a bit different. Everyone's oven, some people's ovens are hotter and cooler. So just go ahead and go with what works for your oven. All right, let's go ahead and make the Caesar as my kale is still drying over there. You know what? My kale should be dry by now. Let's grab the kale. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the kale. We're gonna chop the kale together. I'll show you how I chop kale really easily, and then we'll go ahead and make the Caesar dressing. All right. Okay, so I've got one big ol' head of kale over here. And my favorite, and what I find to be the easiest way to deal with kale, okay, other than buying it pre-cut, which you are also welcome to do, is taking the bottom, okay, and you're just gonna take your 2 fingers and you are just going to strip the kale. And this is already washed. I'm just gonna toss it in a bowl and we'll come back to it in a minute. Okay, so we're at 2 fingers. We're going to strip the kale off of the stem. That's it. Then our stem, you can save it, you can freeze it, you can use it in soup if you want to. You can put it in your compost. Those are really my only suggestions. There's not too much you can do with kale stems. So we're just gonna toss this all in a big bowl. There are 4 of us eating tonight, so we're using a bunch of kale. I'm looking at my comments over here. Dana said Fadi. Yeah, Fadi is a good brand. I like the Fadi brand, but there's another one that I really love. Oh my gosh, it's called, Fadi is good for anything low FODMAP, for any of you who are IBS sufferers. I don't need to suffer with IBS. IBS thrivers. They make low FODMAP food. Low FODMAP packaged foods like barbecue sauces and salad dressings, and it's really delicious. But I'm trying to remember, I can picture it too. It's this incredible garlic infused olive oil, which is just a great option if you can't do raw garlic. All right, almost done over here. I do want to mention too, this is still a little bit wet. Before I go to put my Caesar dressing on this kale, I am going to dry it off because oil and water don't mix. And so, all right, there we go. Big old bowl of kale. Now we're gonna chop it. So oil and water don't mix. So you wanna make sure that when you do go to put your dressing on there, all right, I'm gonna show you what I'm doing over here. That it's nice and dry. That's what I'm trying to say. It's nice and dry. So it actually sticks, because that would be really sad if you spent all this time making this delicious Caesar dressing and you chopped up all your kale and now it's not even coating the kale. So we're gonna dry it off one more time after, but here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna roll it up in a big old ball. I'm gonna take my knife, okay? We already talked about knife techniques at the beginning of last month, and if you are brand new here to cook with Kris, you can go back into my IGTV, and you can watch a whole lesson on knife skills. And we're just holding that knife with our proper technique, and we're chopping in one direction and then the other, making sure to use that claw. And just like I said with the croutons, you guys, you want to make sure that these are bite-sized pieces. No one wants to chomp into a gigantic piece of kale, okay? We like kale. Kale's delicious, but no one wants to chomp into a giant piece of it. So we're gonna chop it up into small pieces, and we're gonna go ahead and put it in another bowl, the chopped pieces, just until we have room in the big bowl. So I'm just gonna do this in batches. Same deal. Big old bowl of kale, chop in one direction, chop in the other. So this is why it's really helpful to just have those basic knife skills, to know how to hold your knife the proper way, so that you have that, you know, you're actually using your weight to chop that kale so it comes together quickly, so you're not chopping kale for hours, so that you actually have that control of your knife. So this is nothing fancy over here. We're not doing any sort of fancy chopping techniques. We just know that if we hold the knife the right way and we're putting our back into it, that it's gonna come together a lot quicker and a lot easier. And you know, we're all about ease in the kitchen around here. That is what I am all about. And if you're here, I bet you're about that too. All right, last little bit of kale. And then we're gonna let that sit, and we're gonna do our easy Caesar dressing. If you're just hopping on, I already shared what's in the easy Caesar dressing. But I made a homemade mayo. You do not have to use homemade. You can use whatever you have on hand. But that's what I'm using as my base. Got some lemon juice. I've got some Worcestershire sauce. Yes, I do have anchovies, but if you want to keep it fish-free, you can also use some capers instead. And a little bit of Parmesan. And I'm using an immersion blender. You can use a blender. If you were using grated Parm, you are also welcome to just whisk it together, but it will have a little bit more texture to it that way. Alrighty, we've got our kale. I'm gonna go ahead and put this off to the side. Gonna wipe things down for a second because we're gonna get into the Caesar portion. Now all these things are basic, but you guys, knowing things like making sure that all of the ingredients in your salad are bite-sized and are around the same size, that is gonna make your meal so much more satisfying. Because again, chomping into a giant piece of kale or a crouton that just doesn't fit your mouth, that's not very appealing. And ultimately, we want our meals to be satisfying. And satisfaction is more than just eating ingredients that we enjoy. It has to do with taste, texture, and temperature, so that mouthfeel too. So going back to that taste, texture, and temperature, we're gonna go ahead and talk about taste right now with the Caesar dressing that we're gonna use. The texture we talked about, we've got the kale, and then we're gonna do some protein on top for us. We're gonna do rotisserie chicken tonight, and we've got those crispy croutons on top. We've got a little bit of the grated Parmesan on top as well. It's also important to recognize what kind of textures you like. If you don't like the texture of kale, you can try this out. If you don't love it, try it with romaine. If you don't love the texture of the big croutons, then go ahead and crumble them up and use crumbles instead, or use those roasted chickpeas. Remember, satisfaction is individual, so take the things I teach you and try them out and then make it yours. Make it your own. There are basic rules of cooking, but I ultimately want to be here to provide an opportunity to really just inspire you to eat foods that you love and learn to be more confident and comfortable in the kitchen so you can create more meals that you really, truly love and that your family really, truly loves as well. All right, let's make an easy Caesar. Okay, let's gather our ingredients over here. Easy Caesar. All right, we've got, I should have kept my cutting board, but it is what it is. We've got a lemon that I'm going to slice in half. My little lemon juicer. This is one of my kitchen essentials. I love this guy. We know my other kitchen essential is my microplane. So we've got a lemon. We've got my mayo. You can use, again, homemade or whatever you've got on hand. This is an avocado oil mayo. We've got some Parmesan. We've got a clove of garlic that I'm just going to go ahead and peel because I'm going to grate that on in. Texture, again, you guys, with the dressing, Totally up to you what kind of texture you want. If you really want it nice and smooth, use a blender. You can totally whisk it together if you want. I mean, I would recommend not using a parm that's this thick. You would use, if you are making it, if you want it dairy-free, then you could definitely use a nutritional yeast instead, but you would use grated parm if you just want to whisk it together. You can totally whisk it together if you would like, but the texture is up to you. So take what I share and make it your own. Okay, first thing we're gonna do. So like I said, I am using a homemade mayo, but you can use whatever you got on hand, whatever your favorite mayo is. It's an avocado oil mayonnaise, and the reason I like avocado oil is just because it's a healthy fat, but it's also neutral flavor, so it doesn't have a super strong flavor. Making mayo with with olive oil, especially extra virgin, can have a really strong flavor, as healthy as it is. So we're gonna add about 3/4 of a cup of mayo, and I am using a mason jar, a wide mouth mason jar, because like I said, I'm using an immersion blender. So you can add this to your blender or to your bowl, and clearly, I'm not measuring here. We're gonna talk about layering salt here, okay? And we are gonna layer as we go and taste as we go. I do have a recipe for this. It is on my blog. I will share it in my stories afterwards. However, I really want to encourage you guys to taste your food and to make it in a way that really tastes good to you. I'm gonna grab a little cutting board over here. Okay, so we're gonna start with about 3/4. We're gonna do a little more. It's a little bit less than about 3/4 of a cup of a neutral mayo. Now, especially if you're using a store-bought mayo, your mayonnaise is gonna have some salt in it already. We are adding a few salty or briny, otherwise known as briny, ingredients, okay? I'm gonna add some Worcestershire sauce. This is just one that lost its label, but I promise it's Worcestershire sauce. So hard to say. We're gonna add some Worcestershire sauce. We're gonna add some anchovies, or like I said, you can also add capers. We are adding Parmesan, and we're adding lemon juice, which if you were here when we talked about flavor foundations, also adds some flavor to it as well. It doesn't necessarily, it adds seasoning, I mean. It doesn't add salt, but it can enhance that flavor. So we've got our mayonnaise to start. We're gonna add lemon juice. I've already got a little bit of lemon juice left in here from when I made mayo. It needed a little bit more than a half of a lemon, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with that. You're gonna wanna use about 2 tablespoons, but that's always the starting point, right? So your Caesar dressing, the foundation of your Caesar, is going to be, and your traditional Caesar, by the way, they just use the egg and the oil and they whisk it all together, but we don't got time for that. Not as busy mamas. All right, this is about 1.5 tablespoons. I'm gonna start with that, but you want about 2 tablespoons to start. We're gonna add the liquid ingredients, and then we can add as we go. Okay, so about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. We're gonna add about 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire. Remember, this is also salty on its own. If you want a vegan, use vegan mayo and use a vegan Worcestershire, because Worcestershire does also have anchovies in it. So we've got, it looks real delicious now, doesn't it? We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna open up the anchovies, and I am gonna add 2 fillets. Okay, I'm gonna chop them up. For those of you who don't like anchovies at all, I do and my kids do actually. They are tiny little fish, super rich in omega-3s, and very, very salty, but they are traditional in Caesar dressing. So these are flat fillets packed in oil. Okay, so there's the screenshot. All right, I'm just going to use 2, but if you really like them and you want to use more, you can feel free. A lot of people also love to add them to the top of their salad after. Totally, whoops, I'm dropping garlic pieces. Totally up to you. I'm just going to chop these up really small. Again, I should have put something down for this cutting board. I am using an immersion blender, so I'm not too worried about this getting like super de-duper small. But if you are just whisking this together, please, goodness, you definitely want to mince up your anchovies, because as great a salty flavor they add, we don't want chunks of anchovies in our Caesar, please. No, don't do that. Okay, so this is about 1 to 2 teaspoons of anchovy paste. So I would start small. Start with the 2 fillets, okay? Again, we're adding this to the immersion blender. This is about 2 teaspoons of anchovy paste. So if you're using paste, start with 1 teaspoon, okay? And with capers, it is actually about the same amount. It's about 1 to 2 teaspoons of capers as well. So we're gonna go ahead and add that in. Remember, we are layering. We have a somewhat salty ingredient, okay, the mayo. It's homemade, so this one isn't super salty, but again, if it's store-bought, everyone's a little bit different. We added the lemon juice, which adds some seasoning. We added the Worcestershire sauce, salty. We added the anchovies or capers, okay, salty. And we're gonna add the garlic, and I am just gonna grate the garlic right on in, because keep it simple, make it easy. I'm using raw garlic here, because that is traditional with Caesar. You can add more, again, if you want it super garlicky, but 1 clove of raw garlic tends to add quite the punch. My oldest daughter calls it spicy, even though technically it's not spicy. It does add a little bit of heat. We've got our salt on standby if we think we need it, but we're gonna try it without for now. And you know what, I'm gonna blend this up before I add the parm, because the parm I have is flakes. So I'm gonna get this nice and blended first before I go ahead. And so I'm using an immersion blender, like I said. So I'm just going all the way down. I'm just gonna move it around a little bit. Up and down. And now's about the time where I go, it's been a little bit longer than 10 minutes on my croutons. Maybe I should check on them. All right, well, some of them are perfect and some of them are a little bit dark. It is what it is. I'm just mixing them around a little bit, just so that they don't continue to cook on the bottom. All right, back to our dressing. Don't forget about your croutons, because you're talking. Okay, all right, we're looking good. Now, you'll notice the texture is pretty thick, okay? I like it like that, sorry, and it's a little bit loud. Especially if I'm using kale, because I am going to actually massage the kale with the dressing. Now, I'm just gonna give it a little taste right now, and then we're gonna add a little bit of Parmesan to it, and that's gonna kind of determine how much parm I wanna add to it. Parm adds flavor, but again, it also adds salt too. So good. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're adding the parm. I think it could use a little bit more lemon juice already, but we're gonna add a little bit of parm. So I'm gonna add, just gonna crush it up a little bit. I'm gonna add about 3 to 4 tablespoons. Okay, and this is gonna thicken it up. And like I said, you can already taste that it needs a little bit more acid. Taste as you go. So I'm gonna squeeze a little bit more lemon juice and add just a little bit more. And yeah, I am making a little bit of a mess, but that's part of cooking. If you don't make a mess, did you really cook? All right, I'm just gonna add about half of a teaspoon. Or sorry, about a teaspoon. Okay. Try to keep it as clean as possible around here. But you know. Okay. I'm going to taste it one more time. I use the back end of this, so I'm going to use the other side. pretty darn good. It's really good. Okay. So listen, guys. I wanted a little bit more garlicky because I like some garlic. I'm gonna add the rest of the lemon juice because I like it lemon. I'm gonna add a little teeny pinch of salt because I think I could use it. But I want you to take it from here, and I want you to do it in a way that works for you. Because ultimately, I want you to enjoy your food, and I want you to be satisfied by your food. And I know I've said that about a bazillion times, but it's important. It's really important that you are doing this, that I'm teaching you the technique, but you're actually tasting it, and you're going, this tastes good to me. If you want to leave the anchovies out entirely, go for it. If you want to put half a clove of garlic in, go for it. If you want to double the lemon juice, go for it. It's up to you. But taste as you go. Layer the salt. Don't add it all at once, okay? So that you can taste as you go. And you can make it something that you really, really love. Okay. Adding that garlic. I'm eating with my parents tonight. We will see how much garlic they can handle. I should mention, okay, I already made an emulsion by making the homemade mayonnaise, and you are technically making an emulsion, blending this all together. But if you keep this in the fridge, there is a possibility that it will separate. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you need to blend it again before you serve. That's it. Super easy. All right, I'm gonna taste it one more time. When I worked in restaurants, we would have like usually it was like a glass or something. One of them was with spoons that you used to taste, and one of them was with spoons that have already been used. And like pens during COVID. Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's really good. So good. Let's add it to our kale. Okay. But yes, even in professional kitchens, this is something that chefs do. Chefs, they are very intentionally taste as they go. Chefs don't just magically know how much to put in because things change, right? And the lemons are gonna be juicier sometimes than other. The garlic is gonna be stronger sometimes than other times. And you wanna make sure that you are playing off of the ingredients that you are actually using, that are actually available in front of you. You're not just blindly following a recipe. So I'm just gonna make a little bit of this because we're gonna eat this for dinner tonight. So I'm just gonna make like a little teeny tasting right now. I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I massage it all together. One more spoon. I'm gonna show you how I massage it all together and how I kind of go ahead and serve it up. You guys can let me know as I'm doing this if you have any questions. And so when it comes to how much you put on, by the way, this is the texture, okay? Any sauce that you make, you want it to coat the back of a spoon. That's how you know it's the right texture. All right, let's see. We're taking off the hair elastic. We've already washed the hands. Okay, so all I'm doing is I am literally giving this kale a massage. So how much you put on? You put on as much as you would like for the taste you would like. You need to have enough to massage it into a texture that you enjoy. So how much you massage your kale is up to you. So I just like to coat it all really, really well. And I like it when it looks a little something like this. It's nice and coated, but the real way to tell, you guys, the real way to tell is to taste it. Normally I would tell you to season this, but so good. It's already very well seasoned. You do not need extra salt in this. So you can leave it like this for a couple hours. It'll continue to wilt a little bit, but this does have a hefty amount of seasoning on it, so you can expect it to wilt down a little bit after. If you want to just spend a little bit more time massaging it, right before you go ahead and serve it. That's typically what I recommend. So let me go ahead and just share with you really quick how I'm gonna go ahead and serve this up. So let me go ahead and grab a bowl and grab a couple croutons. And we don't have the protein with us right now, but we can pretend that there's a protein on top to make it a complete balanced meal. But you know, we're doing what we can at 2:37 in the afternoon. This could be lunch for you guys too. I know it's not 2:37 for all of you. So I like I'm gonna add a little bit of parm on top. I like adding the pieces, but that is a personal preference. You can add whatever you would like, or even better, grate it on top. That's the ultimate, in my opinion. We're gonna add some croutons. Alrighty, you guys. There we go. How delicious. Super easy Caesar. Did not take very much time at all. I've been blabbing to you guys. This whole thing took me it took me 35-ish minutes to chat with you guys the whole way through. If you just went ahead, got all your ingredients together, and made this would be like a 20-minute dinner. So easy, so delicious, so satisfying. So I want to encourage you to try out this recipe. I'll post it in my stories, but take the time to add a little bit at a time, taste as you go, and add what tastes good to you. You are the best judge of what is going to be the most delicious to you. So take this formula and go ahead and make it your own. Okay, friends, this was so fun today. I'm going to go ahead and head off and enjoy a little bit of this first. But I want you guys to know that I'll be back here next week at 2 o'clock Eastern doing another Cook with Kris, to be determined what we're going to cook next week. But I'll let you guys know, so be sure to check in my stories, and I will share with you guys what we're going to make next week. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you guys soon.